Ahoy. So thanks for the invitation and introduction. Our office at Pucher was founded like almost 8 years ago. Don't worry if you make strange moves, because that shows that you should go further with the slide. Now next slide. So, this is our planet. Our office is in Graz in Austria. And, oh, let's start already, yeah? So I will start with some of the projects we really like, and I come to these 3 sentences that Adam mentioned. So all our work we are doing, we try to prove over 3 quality levels. The first is keep the project simple. That means you should be able to explain it in 3 sentences. The second one is which role or what does it mean your project in the future history of architecture. And the third quality level is if you make the lecture somewhere out of Austria, why should students like you be interested in it? And that's interesting because if you do some work, you always have to question yourself why you are doing this. And with these 3 sentences or with these 3 quality checks, we try to make good architecture. So those are just a few projects at the beginning which come from the very first year of the office. The office was founded by Pucher just with 1 employee, and that was 8 years ago, and now it's about 40 people working in our office. So this is a little office building in Graz, in the very center of the old town, and we like it a lot because it's just also beautiful architecture. To the next picture. That was a competition for the National Museum of Estonia, and we got 2nd prize. And it's just one of the projects we like a lot. It was done in 2 weeks, the competition. And yes, let's go to the next one. This is the first project of our bigger international competitions we won. It's the headquarters of the OEC in Jeddah. The OEC is something like the United Nations of the Arabic world. It's the Organization of Islamic Cultures. Our office mainly gets the commissions or the job by competitions, because we are not that established, because we are pretty young as an office, so we have to do competitions. And for us it's very interesting to do international competitions, because otherwise we would just do jobs in Graz. That's why I also start with that one, because this competition was done in the 3rd year of the office, and for us it was a big and true success, of course, to do such a prominent project. The weak point of that is that in this Arabic world, if you win a competition, that doesn't automatically mean that you will build it. This project would have been a gift of the Sheikh of Saudi Arabia to this Organization of Islamic Cultures. The reason is that the headquarters now is in Istanbul, and since there were always these discussions that Turkey will join the European Union, they wanted to have this headquarters in an Arabic country. But that Sheikh already died. His oldest son is now the new leader of the country, and I think he's already 80-something and in the hospital. So we don't know, once a year we get a phone call that they want to start now with the project, but it hasn't started. So let's continue. We can go through the slides now. This is a map of the world. Who has the oil? That shows a bit of this financial power of that region. And you can see it, the scale of Saudi Arabia comparing to the capacity, how much oil we have, is pretty big. The project is situated in Jeddah, and Jeddah is the historical harbor from where this yearly Hajj to Mecca started. So it has some meaning in the history of Saudi Arabia. We go to the next one. And that was something when we visited Jeddah. Surprisingly, a sandstorm came. And if a sandstorm came like that, it totally changes in 1 minute. So you see this wall of sand coming to the city, and after 1 minute you can't see anything anymore. And that even has a result of architecture or the design you have to do, because you have to use very stable and very resistant materials on the facade. Because a sandstorm like that would really erase if you have some fragile color or something. That's pictures of Mecca, where you see what it means, this Hajj. I think it was this year in the news a lot, because like they have millions of people who go in there. And this year, like, by some tragic accidents, a lot of them died, because it's very difficult to handle those masses. And that, just to remind you, like Jeddah was like this, for many, many people, the starting point of this Hajj. Now we can go quickly through those. Those are just like people who were involved, like meeting with the sheikhs. This now is the site of the competition. We go to the next one. Again, a map. Here we can see Jeddah, like on the sea, and this is Mecca. So that is this very important connection. Again, a zoom in. The historic town of Jeddah was very small, and it is one of those cities who almost exploded in the last years, since they have the money from the oil. So again, and here is the site. The historic town is almost not existing anymore. So those Arabic cities, they have a big change. If they have an historic center, it's almost fake. So everything is based like on shopping mall system and indoor spaces, because the climate is so extreme there that you rather spend your time indoor, climatized, and that's why they changed like these historic towns into like new settlements. One surprise for us was we had to design it on this part of Jeddah, and a few weeks after the competition result, they told us, no, they bought a new site and we should rather do it there. So it's nothing that you can trust on, and you have to be very flexible to do projects in such a country. This is something like a timeline where like in Europe or in the Western world, high-rise buildings were established. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that in the Arabic world, already by building towers for the mosques, they did around the year 1000, they start to build pretty high buildings. So that's like the first picture of our design. So we also had to do a tower, of course. If I go back to this first idea to explain like a project with 2 sentences, it would be like the first sentence to make like a symbol out of the building. And because it will be in the background with some news or something, so it should have some symbolic character. The second one is use symbols from the Arabic world. So you see it almost looks like a minaret. And the third sentence for it was do a landscape project out of it. This you will see on the later pictures, if you go further on. So the project is pretty simple. It's a tower built on a landscape. That also has to do something with the program. First of all, 90% of the program is offices, and they were put in the tower. And 10% is like auditoriums and big halls and conference centers. And they were done in this plate, and we did it like at this 3-dimensional landscape you can see on the ground. That's a section through the tower. As you can see here, the design is based like on a big dome, which is like the entrance to the tower, and following this yellow stripe, there is a central hole which goes in the middle of the tower. And for a few days in the year, when the sun is in the right position, you really have like this sun exactly standing in front, above the tower, and you get the daylight through the whole building into the Great Hall. These are just like the elements where this landscape is made of. It's like something like a woven 3-dimensional landscape. So you can see it's also important for us to make a building like this not too private. So this is like a public park where people can walk on the roof of the building, and it's pretty spectacular because we always can go like under some elements and over some structures. So it's something like bridges or like a woven, like a textile landscape that also provides a shadowing part. That's like main entrance. So you see the dominant tower also has this strong symbol. Again, like a plan of like a floor plan of this landscape, and you can see here, spread over the whole system are like these little islands which work like oases. So also some green is integrated in it. This is the entrance hall itself. You can read here the word plaza, which is like this, like in a hotel, the entrance, and then you enter just directly under the tower where you find this dome. Again, a floor plan of the conference center. You see like this lecture halls, and like here the big hall, foyer, and this diamond-shaped columns, they mark the position of the tower. That's how that should look like. So you see this wavy style floating roof, and everywhere you have views to these gardens, which are like these outdoor spaces that also bring natural light and green light into the interior space. This is this plenary hall. It's for a bit more than 1,000 seats. Because it works something like the United Nations. It's like a big party event, you can imagine it. This, the concept of the facade was also that it's something like a woven facade, and it's a metal structure which is transparent, so you can look through the metal. And in this case, we made a one-to-one cards because the chief or the president of the OEC was visiting cards incognito. Because if he would have done that officially, the president would have to welcome him, and he just came as a normal tourist, and we prepared for him a one-to-one model of the facade that he can see how does it look in reality. That's the structure behind the tower. You see on the left side, it's based on a concrete cylinder with windows in this a bit like traditional, I call it, shape of an Arabic pattern. These are just some calculation or force line drawings of the static guys. And this is the difference, because you see, like on the left picture, if the light is inside the tower, the windows light through the facade. But you also have the possibility that you put the light on between the concrete wall and the outer facade, and then it just looks like a tower made of light. This shows now the change from day to night modus. And like an important element of the design is the entrance hall, because it's the most prominent room, and there we took some patterns or some symbols of Islamic architecture and tried to transform it into a contemporary solution. So that's the drawing for it. So we took like these outlines that we know from some domes, from some cupolas, from some mosques, and we made something like an explosion drawing out of it. So there's just like one point, it's here not so visible, but it's this main viewpoint, and if you stand at this specific point, then you see the logic of the cupola. And if you stand somewhere else, it looks like a chaotic structure. And here you have to press play, because there's a little animation. And this little movie shows you how it works if you like enter this central hall. Just hold the cursor on the picture. So let's have a little break. I think it's the last one, the film 24 pic. Oh yes. So here you can see you would enter the building through the main entrance. It's a bit slow at the beginning. But you see this three-dimensional landscape, which is like this base with all the conference halls, and now you're on the direction to the center, to this main entrance under the tower. The columns that are bearing the whole structure of the tower, and this is now this cupola with this, on first glance, a bit chaotic structure, but you can already see that it looks in a way Arabic or like this Islamic pattern. And if you look up, you just see like thousands of elements, and in the center this star-shaped hole, which is the central hole through the whole tower. And if you come closer to the center, you come to this one specific viewpoint, which is here, and then all this pattern comes to a certain logic, and from here you can see it looks like a flat decoration of it. So there the three-dimensionality of this sphere becomes like one pattern. that brings us to another project that it was a competition we did in the year 2010 in Warsaw, in Poland, and it was the Sinfonia. And last week we signed the contract, so it took 5 years that they gathered all the money together to build it, and now they want to start it. We are very happy about it, of course. And we called it the Garden of Music, and here we tried to design it like a movie. And that's why we say the performance starts at home. And we also explained the competition like you would explain a movie. So you do it like scene by scene. And it's about that if you go to a concert, you start preparing yourself at home, you get nicely dressed. And it's also very important the way to the concert hall. Or that was for us very important. And that's the way how we expressed or explained the project. So you see it here, it starts, you're sitting in the taxi on your way to the concert hall, and on the first thing you know the address, but you can't see any building. If you come closer to it, just like a big volume appears, like a big wall. And you're a bit like, if it's the first time that you visit it, you're a bit surprised because it doesn't look like a concert hall in a way that you are used that a concert hall should look like. Then you're standing in front of a big wall, and you still don't know where is the entrance, but you see there's a little gap. So this wall is flying in the height of 3 meters from the ground. Then you step under the wall, and inside of that space you see this very nice, we call it like a fairy tale garden, or the garden of music. So it's also like an outdoor or a landscape project, and this would be this semi-public space that is especially done for those people who go to the concert hall, but it's also open to the public, because like there's no gate, no fence, it's just like this big flying wall, which is like the border between the indoor space and the space out of the concert hall. And then the first thing you see is this historic building, which is standing on the plot, and we just had to restore it, and there we will do some like artist in residence. It's like a hotel for musicians. And even if you enter the wall like here, the first attention is this historic building, but it's not the concert hall. So you enter that garden, and then you have to find yourself and to look around where will be the concert hall. Here it's a model picture of it. So you see this was the existing building, which is protected. And it was like a very noble villa in the old time of Warsaw. So it had these 4 supporting buildings always on the corner. And those buildings we also kept, but we let them outside of the wall. So that inside this special space, just like this historic villa is standing. And then if you like look around and you see, in the meanwhile it's already night, that on one point this wall makes a curve and goes up, and some light is shining through, so you recognize that must be the entrance. And then the next scene is you enter under the wall, and then you are in the foyer of the music hall. And finally then you come to the concert hall itself, which is like down you see like these waving balconies. Here again, like the concert hall itself from the outside is pretty shy. You can't see it, it's just part of the wall. It looks like it's like the thicker part of the wall that surrounds this garden and the historic building. That's like a plan of the garden and the main foyer. And one principle was also that this outdoor space, which is just in this drawing for the competition designed like a historical garden, this will change during the design process in future now, but it should also flow with similar elements into the foyer. So there's not a big difference in the layout or in the surface of outdoor and indoor space. Some sections, so you see it's pretty complicated because you have, if you do a concert hall, you have to provide that all the seats have a good view to the stage. You have to consider all these acoustic specialists that help you to calculate the materials and the geometry of the space, that there is no echo or just the echo that you want to have. One thing that we tried to invent is a new principle of a concert hall. There are 2 main principles existing now. One is the so-called shoebox, you can see on the left side. That's how the classical concert halls worked like. It's a space like here, rectangular, and it has ideal reflection and ideal acoustic. The problem is just that no one sees the conductor, just the first 3 rows has a good view on the conductor and like on the orchestra, and all the others who sit like from the 5th row on, they just have a bad view. The other system is some kind of a stadium where you say everyone has a good view because you sit on balconies and you have the right angle to look down to the stage, but those concert halls, they usually don't have such a good acoustic. And we tried together with our acoustic engineers to overlap those 2 systems. So we built a shoebox with this rectangular outline of the hall, and we inserted those stadium-style balconies. And in their models they did, it was this Müller office from Munich, and they are specialists in acoustic and in concert halls. They say it works pretty well. You just have to provide that the surfaces of the stadium elements are not reflecting the noise, and only the surface, the facades of the shoebox, they are reflecting. And with this overlapping of 2 systems, you provide that you have pretty good acoustic and also very nice view to the orchestra. That's some model pictures for the second phase of the competition, and we were pretty proud because a lot of very prominent offices participated. For example, Zaha Hadid was 2nd prize, and we, as at that time very unknown office 5 years ago, finally won the 1st prize in this 2-stage competition. And that was already in the 2nd stage that you have to give them such a precise and big scale model. We did it already that you can put some light on and then some light comes from under it. Like the concert hall was end light, but also in the model. You can go just through. That also shows that it's this floating wall, and that also if you pass by, that you can have this glimpse or this like first look under it. Another competition we won in the 1 year later, in the year 2011, was the Academy of Music in Tallinn in Estonia. The other competition was about that they want to make a school for music, ballet and singing. And it's a very nice concept because they wanted to have all the rooms of teaching, all the big halls and concert halls included, and also a dormitory for the students. So it's like really like this education hybrid building. Here you can see a picture of Tallinn. It's a pretty flat city, of the northern sea. And here is our site. And if you go to, it's like on a crossing of very heavy traffic. So we had a lot of noise there. And if you imagine you have to make like a school for music where it's very dedicated about like acoustic and so, it's somehow the worst plot in the city to do that. Because you just have such a noise of traffic there. So our idea was, if you go back, once back here, to make this so-called garden of music or garden of silence even. So we make a pretty classic solution like a block structure, and with this you provide an open space which is like totally in the silence. And this you can see in the next picture because we tested this with some like acoustic calculation. And there, like violet is very bad in acoustic, it's very loud there. It's already pretty fine. And with making this enclosed frame, where the outdoor space of this school happens protected inside of this frame, we create like a pretty silent park. Here you see so like the main idea is to make this big block that contains all the rooms for the school, and all the public rooms, or like the concert rooms, which also have public access, happens in the front part. So there they form also the foyer and the entrance, and everything was done, as you can see in the section, under a big staircase. So those, we can go through those pictures now, because those just show like the floor plans. And that was an important element, that all these big halls we put under this staircase, and the staircase is something like a terraced extension of the indoor space. So it's very nice for the students or for the kids who got teach there or who live in the dormitory, that they have a lot of outdoor space, and they even can climb up a hill, because that's an element they don't have in their landscape, because everything is super flat. And inside we made like this forest that also should be done out of trees which are found there in the landscape, so they survived the strong winter there. and that should make like this very nice outdoor space, or like this so-called garden of silence. Here you see this staircase should be done pretty transparent, so that you even can look through the steps. And also these are just drawings from the competition, so even we thought about how to make the insulation of such a staircase that you still can provide that parts of it are made of glass and you can look through of it. Also again some model pictures of the competition. Again you can see this skin, like the frame wrapped around it inside this outdoor space. Just can go through, there's some model pictures. That leads us to another project. Some local one now in Austria, a hospital that we want in Salzburg. And hospital architecture is something pretty special because those buildings work like machines. They are very technical, they are highly equipped, and you don't have so many possibilities to make like aesthetic there or really good looking or nice architecture. So in our case, the 3 sentences for that design was make a machine, a building that really works well. Because that's something basic, every hospital has to work well, it's a very expensive building and it just has to work. The second thing was, we found a study of so-called green healing. That means really like scientists in the US found out, if you have direct view to green in a hospital, that reduces the time, how long you stay in the hospital. So if you can look out of your window in the hospital and you see some tree or some nature, you don't stay as long as someone who just see other houses if you look out. So the second thing for us was just maximize the green thing, or like the park space on the building and in the building. And the third sentence was like, if you analyze a program of a hospital, we have different functions. Like you can reduce it to 2. One is where you get the treatments, where the doctors are working, and the second one is where you stay as a patient, your patient rooms. And it was to make for those functions like the ideal floor plan. So this was our solution. You see like there's this big campus of the existing hospital, and here in this more yellowish color that was like our design, you see like these 4 parks and this cross. And if you go to the next one. So this is like a level of this like functional part of it, where the doctors have their offices. And this was based on this double finger system with a so-called magistrale in the middle, which is the main X from where you just enter the different sectors of the hospital. And that's like the floor plan of the sector where you have the rooms, and we did it like as a cross. So you have one point in the middle where you reach, where you come with your elevators, and here you have the different stations. So with this we provided like an ideal floor plan with this double figure for like the technical part of the hospital or the medical part of the hospital, and the cross style is like a pretty good solution for the stations, because you just need one point with the elevations and from there you reach like 4 units. And this was the first phase. They started with just the park house. It's for like 1,200 something cars. And this we finished a few months ago. We go to the next picture. And that's the facade for it. And this is an interesting building because it's a very like technical support building. It's just like the car parking. And we made the facade to the structural element. So what you see here, those thin elements in different shades of gray, this is like the buried facade. And behind the parking structure is just like this double ramp system. Another project we did in the Arabic world was in Lusail in Qatar, a housing project. There you can see the site. It's like one of these cities which are just generated out of the desert. There was just a small town before, and now they have a lot of money again because of oil, and they are building settlements like crazy because they also got like the soccer championship, world championship. So you see here all of those, or what you see here like new settlements built like in the last 10 years, and our site is the marked one. And it's like pretty like high-class housing, so they have their own beach, as you can see here. And like this is like a conceptual model, so it looks like 6 different crystals standing there, and all of them have like strange shapes, and all this shaping come from that all of them have to have like perfect view to the seaside. Even if you have like a pretty high density there for housing, we wanted to provide them a maximum quality that all apartments just have a good view. Here you can see like the city front and the seaside, and in between those buildings and also the public space in between the building is this landscape plateaus. So it's this kind of terraced landscape which is connecting the different elements. And all of them, we have view from the public places, like from the squares, and of course also from the, if you go to the next one, also from the building themselves. So all the sides of the houses have view. And also like from the main entrance, from this turnaround. The building themselves are interpretation of the classic Arabic house of these courthouses, because there the architecture is a bit more about shadow, what light means to our architecture, because they have so many light and it's so hot there that they really like to have those like semi-bright places, like those shadowy courtyards. And we did something that we just stapled this classic Arabic house and made like this tower. So you see there's like a little opening on the top, and again we have like this little light coming into this atrium, which is enough for that circumstances there because it's really hot and really full of sunlight. And different apartments, terraces everywhere, and of course that you have these public functions like bars and retail in the ground floor, which is also supporting this landscape made of terraces. Here you see some floor plans, and those floor plans look pretty similar on these like originally one-story traditional houses you find there. And they, of course, they step back, as you could have seen in the model, and this step back, if you come higher up in the building, just comes from that they provide better view and don't give shadow to each other, or block the view. And just with some facade studies, that we have some of these like blinder elements. Another project that we did in Graz is a competition that we won 1 year ago. It's this so-called Dining House Goes Smart. And that's a very interesting project because, as you can see here, it's this post-industrial area in the city. It was a big former brewery, and it's like not in use since almost 50 years. And the city was growing around this area. So it's one of the, or it is like the biggest empty area in the city of Graz. And it's pretty much close to the center, as we see in the next slide. This here, that's a city map of Graz. This white line marks the railway, which is the natural border between the city center and like these suburbs. But since, and I think that's similar in every European city, you can't call these suburbs anymore behind that border, because also here we have already historic parts like here. And this is like just like, but it was always like the back side of the city because it's behind the railways. And of course, Graz is extremely growing. It is like every 10 years it grows by the number of 10%, which means like the next 10 years, like 20 to 25,000 people will move to Graz. So it's a big necessity of re-densification of the city. And since we are limited with the outline because there are like mountains around it, and we don't want to go to the suburbs, like the answer to it just can be like re-densification. Which means you have to extend the center to the place where now it's called not the center, like the suburbs. And here you can see that this arrow shows you exactly to the location of Rheinenhaus, which is this area, and this is the very historic center. Similar to Berlin, we also have like some mountain with a castle on the top, and like here the old town, so that would be like our Spielberg. So this cross marks the two main axes that was given us as the base of the competition, which came from like a older master plan for that site, and it's two axes. One marks, this should be like the public north-south connection. And this marks a position of a future central park, which is the green X that overlaps like across this main public X. Here again you can see areas that influence the site. In light green you can see the competition site, and here we have a university, this circle, which is in the very neighborhood. Here you have the main railway station in that circle, and that's like one of the most important crossings of individual transporting cars. Those two lines again show these main lines that were given to us as a base for the competition. The red one, the so-called esplanade. Also in the future they want to build a tram line here, so this will be the public transport backbone of the whole settlement. And the green one is this new central park they want to establish in the center of the whole settlement. It's also important to say that this whole area, what you can see here, is designed to be totally free of cars. Cars are not allowed to enter, so or you have like big garages under it and entrances to the garages from the borders of the site, but all the streets are without cars. So it's just for pedestrians, for bikes and public transport. This marks now like, since this is extremely big, that was the first competition which was done on Mining House, and that what we did is, like, here it was like the task for us how to create a vibrant and pretty dense city or like part of a town where nothing is. We just have a few existing buildings from which were like a former brewery, but the rest is something like even farmland. You could see it in the first pictures, everything was just building. And we started to take these stripes they gave us. First is the stripe that we called super public, which is this so-called esplanade. That's where the triangle is. Then we have a public stripe, which is the main road, which is already existing, that will bring all the individual traffic into it. And then we said in this north-south direction, we create two semi-public stripes. These were just like some sketches that how can we find some design for this. And we found this landscape architect from Brazil, this Pucher, and we like his work a lot, so we said, why don't we make like, public spaces, not use forms like he did, because we think he just created very nice spaces instead. So we made like a bit like in his style, these so-called fields, and we called them programmed fields, and those we were placing there in the east-west direction. And we said, for example, this can be like this old animals field. The next one is a field full of sport functions. That's a field full of like consumer shops and like this kind of functions. And another one is a stripe or like a field which is just programmed as a park stripe, so green. And by overlapping these programmed fields with the stripes, in the next picture, we created some kind of matrix. And that's a very nice or a very interesting way how to do urbanism, that you start just that you make fields and you give them like a certain function, and this is like the base of it. And just on the next step we start to place your orders. Then we did some like who could be like the user, like the user. And we did like this, as we would have interviewed people who will move there, and what are their wishes, what their dreams, how would they like to live there, and all these ideas we tried to put there in our final design. Then we also said we should provide a maximum variety of different ways how you can live in housing forms. You see like the block terrace house, existing buildings, urban farming, row house, atrium house, tower. So we tried to really offer, and that is also a result of these interviews that we did for ourselves. If we want to attract everyone from society, so we have a big range of people who live there, we also have to offer them a big range of possibilities how we can live there. So we placed like those different forms. You can see sometimes we have like court houses, we have stripes, we have snakes, we have towers, we have the traditional houses, we have row houses. So we placed like all these different ways how to build apartments, and everything is following these first fields and stripes, which was like the base drawing how you do like the ground or the open space. And that is the overlapping of those principles. And now you can see the logic, because in the ground floor, those structures, they are following the lines and the curves of this programming of the ground and of the surface, and the towers and the higher buildings, which are marked blue here, they are settled a bit independently from that. And this is a more precise plan where you can see that, of course, there are also some green stored fields, and the design of exterior space is overlapped with it. And for us, it was like, if you do like a city that should work like for the next century, take the best that you find in architectural history. So the ground floor, we took elements like you can find in historic cities. We have parts which are very narrow, then they open to a bigger space. Then it becomes narrow again, and then again some open space. So this is what you also know from the old town of Pucher, that you also have like spaces, narrow streets, bigger spaces. This is a very nice outline for public space, but it's not so good to make apartments there, because that result that you have like a lot of shadowing places, a lot of places which are too narrow. So the next step in architectural history was like food functionalism or modern times, where they were investigating what do we have to do to make perfect apartments. It was more that they have light, sun, and fresh air. So they very often made this cluster type of housing, where all of the buildings have enough distance to each other. And we thought about why not overlap those two principles. Why don't create the ground floor zone or the first two floors in like historic old-style city outlines, and the apartments themselves, which are the higher volumes, they are made as towers which have certain distance to each other to provide themselves enough light and fresh air. So we did like in this static system of superposition, we just overlapped two principles of European urbanism. And that was the result. So you can see the first layer, those colorful fields, is how you program the public space and the parks and the outdoor space. The next one, this orange one, is the ground level zone that creates this like old European town system. And then the blue volumes, the higher ones that have enough distance to each other, so that all of them have blue, sun, and fresh air. Another thing which was very important for us is to design urbanism intersection, which means in the program they asked for a division that you have 75% of apartments and 25% of other program, which should be something like shop, cultural stuff, restaurants, or offices, or everything which is not housing. And to be flexible, it's more about the height of the room than how you do the floor plan of the house. Because if you imagine you make a building, in 10 years if something is changing and you want to redo the design of the house, it's pretty easy to move floors, but it's very difficult to move ceilings. And since nowadays everything has to be very efficient, you have this fixed room height for housing, for apartments, which is around 2.70 meters. But this is too low to make something else there. If you want to have office there, you have to have 3 meter room height. If you want to make restaurants or something there, or shops, you have to have at least 4.5 meter room height. So we thought it's not so good to provide them one building which is just made out of office and another building which is just made out of apartments. Let's do this as a principle over the whole settlement and make the difference in the height of the levels. So we started, which is colored here in red, as a so-called superflex zone, which has a room height of 4.50. So there you can look at everything. You can live there, you just have a great high room. You can make a shop there or even a restaurant, a school, a kindergarten, whatever you want to do. And that is flexible for a very long period. The next one was the so-called flex zone, which is the yellow one, and that had a room height of 3 meters, and this was the zone that could be office or apartment. It just depends on the necessity of the market. And then it was the stable zone, the blue one, which had a room height of 270, which would be apartment forever, because you can't do something else in such a low room height. But unfortunately, you can't make it higher, because you have to put this extreme density of 2.5 over the whole settlement. Those are just some like first tries of how the facade just should look like. And of course, it's pretty massive what we are doing there because it's an extremely high density we have to build there. And since we want to provide a maximum outdoor space or open space, we concentrate the density on a few towers. And all the towers should look different. So we make a green one, a colorful one, a woody one, and so this is still something that we are working on, because also this project is realized in phases. And this green tower you see in the front will be the first building that will start on site like next year. Just like some pictures of it. That's another interesting competition we won also 1 year ago in Vienna. It's a so-called cyklus, and it's a housing project, and it's on a pretty cool site, because as you can see, this forest here is the Prague. This is the old hippodrome, like the riding trail for the horses, and this is the big football stadium over there. And here, you can't see it, but here starts the new VW campus, where very prominent architects built like a new university for business. For example, Zaha did the library there, and this was our plot. And the interesting thing here was that we not very often have the situation that you have a plot where you only have friendly or good neighbors. Because here, if you look to the surrounding, we have here like the university campus, which is a cool neighborhood to have like next to it. Here we have a protected forest, the Praga, which is like the best neighbor you can have because it's always good green. Then we have the hippodrome, which is also nice because it's an open space. And here you have like a pretty well done business area where they had like offices and they did it very well. We go to the next one. So here it was all about to take a bit of a risk. Because in this competition there was an existing master plan, and this master plan was very strictly drawn. They say we have to make a building like this, like a wall, that disconnect the apartments to the campus, to the university, because the students, they make party and they might be loud. And the rest of the apartments you should put on some like squared tower buildings. And they gave us the exact outline, and in these outlines you were allowed to design something. And we said, no, that's not a good tactic, because if you have such a nice plot where you only have friendly neighbors, make it as open as possible. And that way we went to a direction that we did it in round buildings, because we said every of those housing towers should have maximum view to every direction. So it was some kind of like a Belvedere project. And we explained it in a very simple way with a few sketches. So this shows it pretty well, that like from every building you should have a view to every neighbor or to every surrounding field, because just all of them are very interesting. And also the apartments themselves, it's not so cool if you have a round facade, so just the balcony is round, but the outline of the apartments have this rectangular step back and like corners. And with this you provide that every apartment has a few directions where you can make windows. So also the apartments themselves in detail have this multiple view. And all of them are done like in a very strict grid, because it's put also on the garage, so you have to find some logic system, but with very like open style outlines. So the outline of the balconies, they like these free, not very precise circles. The outline of the apartments themselves, they are very rectangular. Okay, that's now another international project we have. It's in Toronto, in Canada. And that was very interesting because there we were asked to transform an existing old bakery, which looks like exactly like this building here, into an office space. And Toronto is a very interesting city because it's extremely booming. A lot of people from all over the world move there, and it's like a crazy market there. You can sell every apartment that you build new, and also a lot of companies move to Canada because they have a bit easier or cheaper tax system like you have in the US. And that brings us to our client, because what we are doing there, you can see here, this is the very center of Toronto with the financial district. The rest of the city is pretty flat and low density. It's all like these single family houses. And we are here, and this is one of these post-industrial areas. And if you zoom in, you can see here, this is like all these former existing production halls and companies. And the building that we had to transform was an old bakery. And our client is the post-production company for Hollywood movies. So they do all this digital stuff and the special effects for the movies. And it's very interesting because even for them it's cheaper to be now in Canada than in Hollywood, like in Los Angeles. And Toronto is already established as a new movie capital. So a lot of series, you might know How I Met Your Mother, they are filmed in Toronto. Because the center of Toronto looks kind of like New York. You have the same high-rise buildings, the same kind of police cars and everything. And even like this quarter here, like this post-industrial area where we have this project, it's also started to get established as an office center for this movie production. They even have a building there where they film all the police movies. So you have a lot of fake policemen there. So if you visit this quarter, you should not be surprised that why are so many policemen there. They are just actors, because they do a lot of these series about police and these indoor shoots of like a police station here. And here's the building itself. And that's also interesting because usually what you learn in school or what you will learn at school about office, it's all about bringing daylight into this space. So your teachers will tell you, oh, this like a wing with office should not be deeper than 60 meters because then you can provide natural light on every working space. They wanted something totally different because all of them are working with computers and they don't want to have any sun reflection on the screen, so they wanted to have dark spaces. They want to have levels like it's open office, so 5,000 square meters as one room, and they only need window on the outline. Because anyway, they work in working circles. So it's 24 hours of working. They have 3 times 8 hours where the people are working. And when they do this programming of this rendering of this post-production, they even don't want to have sunlight. So they have all these working spaces in the center where it's really dark, and just meeting rooms, kitchens, and those things they have on the outer facade. Which was very easy for us because they would just have to restaurate those levels and those big production halls. And we didn't have to care about daylight. But that was very interesting for us because also we thought, oh, it will be difficult, we have to cut light yards to bring daylight in these deep floor plans. But they wished the opposite, they just wanted to have these dark places. So here you can see this is like this existing horse, and of course they like this industrial design of it. So we even don't have to do a lot of things, just like remove asbestos and dirt or poison materials and color it in a nice way, put a nice floor inside. And the interesting thing is they are very quick in Canada with everything. We even got the prize of the best restoration of the project in Toronto before we started the site. Just with the application plans we gave to the authorities, they said, oh, we don't destroy the old building, so we give you the prize for the best restoration. It was a big surprise for us also. And there you can see, so we keep all these materials like the rusty steel and the brick walls. We just add some, of course we open the facade, so we bring these glass facades in, and then we have like these endless floors in the future offices. And since the authorities there, or the city of Toronto, was so happy with this design, they commissioned us now to make a master plan of the whole area there, which is called the Liberty Village, which is pretty cool because we have here all these post-industrial buildings and everything, and they want to have now a master plan how to also integrate housing. So, but this leads us not to a project in Canada. This is not like the last country we visited. Those are our projects in China. China is, as all of you know, a very booming country, and they have a big necessity of apartments and housing. Because they make this transformation now that many people who still live like farmers in the countryside are now moving to the city centers. And because of that, they really build these crazy buildings here. This is a project designed by Atelier from the Netherlands, and usually they do really great architecture. But that's how it looks if they do something in China. Because with this big scale, everything has to be cheap and fast done. Even very good offices make pretty strange output.